Hey boys and girls, so today we're going to be going over Unit 1, Lesson 5, which is adding and subtracting polynomials. Okay, let's look at the do now. It says simplify each of the following by combining like terms. As I look at the first term, 3x squared, I know that 3x squared is a like term with negative 8x squared. They both have an x squared, which means they both have the same variable with the same exponent. So I can go ahead and combine those together. I know that 3 minus 8 is negative 5. And then again, I just keep the x squared. So 3x squared minus 8x squared is negative 5x squared. 2 has the variable x, and this number 1 does not. So these are not like terms, which means I can't combine them together. So they just drop down and they're a part of my final answer. So I'm just going to add on that plus 2x, and then I'm going to bring down and add on that plus 1. And that would be my answer to number 1. Number 2, I'm seeing my first term has an x squared. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight that. And I can see my last term, that negative x squared, right, are like terms. Again, they're like terms because they both have an x squared, which means they both have the same variable with the same exponent. So I'm going to go ahead and try to combine those as well. The only issue is that I can clearly see the coefficient is negative 7 here, and I don't see the coefficient over here. But I know that there's really an invisible 1, so I'm just going to add that on. So now when I go ahead and combine those, a negative 7x squared minus 1x squared gets me a negative 8x squared. And then again, this term in the middle does not have an x squared. This would just be x to the first power. All right, so the variables and the exponents don't match. So I can't combine that, which means I just bring it down and add it on as part of my final answer. Okay, so again, today we're going to be adding and subtracting polynomials. In the past, we've been adding and subtracting and multiplying monomials. A monomial is one term, just like the do now example. This is one term, one term, one term, one term. Underneath, if we look at our notes here, a polynomial consists of several terms. All right, so let's just go and highlight that as well as part of our notes. A polynomial consists of several terms. So as you look in example 1, within these parentheses, I have all of these terms. This would be considered a polynomial because again, I'm grouping 3 terms together. It's more than one, it's several terms. Same thing over here. Inside these parentheses, I have more than one term. Again, that's making it a polynomial because I have several terms inside. So example 1 tells me to add those polynomials together. And I know I'm going to add because I see the plus sign in the middle, right? That's my operation to add. And this is really important. When I'm adding polynomials together, there's 2 steps that I need to follow. The first step is going to be ignoring, so I'm going to write ignore the parentheses if there's a positive 1 in front. So as I look next to this plus sign, there's no number in front of those parentheses. I don't see it, but I know it's there. It's really an invisible 1, so I'm going to go ahead and just add that on. Same thing with the first set of parentheses. There's no number in front, but I know it is there. It's really an invisible 1. This is a positive 1. Here is also a positive 1. So again, when there's a positive 1 in front, I can just ignore the parentheses. And now that I'm ignoring them, step 2 tells me to just start combining my like terms. All right, so I'm going to start highlighting out my like terms here. I see a 3x squared. I know that combines with a positive x squared. I also see a 5x. 5x will combine with a negative 5x. Again, x squared, same variable, same exponent. X and X, same variable, same exponent. And then last but not least, I have a -3 and a +1. Those are just numbers, so I can always add those together. And now I'm going to go ahead and combine my like terms. So a 3x squared plus a 1x squared gets me a 4x squared. 3 plus 1 is 4. I keep the variable and the exponent the same. Next, +5 minus 5 is 0. So 5x minus 5x is 0. So I'm not going to add that on. I'm actually just going to cross it out completely. Those factors or those terms will not be in my final answer because it came to 0. And then a -3 plus 1 gets me a -2. And that's how I would get my final answer for number 1. All right. Again, these are the rules for adding polynomials. Now we're going to go over the rules for subtracting polynomials. Again, I know that I'm using subtraction here because I see that subtraction operation in between both sets of parentheses. The first step would be distributing the negative. So let's add that to our notes. Distribute the negative. Again, well, it's negative what? There's no number in front, but I know there really is. It's really that invisible 1. All right. So again, my first step is to distribute the -1. So I'm going to go ahead and draw in my arrows to distribute to all terms that are inside the parentheses. There's 2 terms here, so I'm going to multiply -1 to both. So -1 times 2 is -2, and then I bring down the x squared. -1 times 4 is -4. Step 2 says to ignore. Again, I'm going to ignore the parentheses if there's a +1 in front, just like we did up top. So if I look in front of my first set of parentheses, notice how I'm drawing this little line from the parenthesis, There's no number, but I know there really has to be 1 there. It's an invisible 1. All right. So if I have a +1, which here I do, I just ignore the parentheses. So I'm just going to rewrite 3x squared plus 1. I just bring it down, nothing's going to change. All right. Anything times 1 is itself. That's why this stays the same. And now I'm going to go ahead for step 3, which is combine like terms. All right, so let me grab my highlighter here. So my first term has an x squared, and this third term has an x squared. Those are like terms because they have the same variable and the same exponent. Then I'm going to go back. +1 combines with -4. Because again, these are just numbers. I can always combine numbers. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. 3x squared minus 2x squared is 1x squared. I know 3 minus 2 is 1, and then I just bring down the x squared. +1 minus 4 is -3, and I am done. That would be the answers to the first page, all right? So let's flip and move on to page 2. Okay. So as we look at these directions, it's telling us to, again, just practice what we went over on the first page. We want to simplify each of the following polynomials. These might be a little bit more challenging just because the coefficient in front could be a +1, it could be a -1, it could be a number like 2. So let's do a few examples here before I have you practice on your own. So the first step is to identify what operation you're using. So if I look at example A, I can tell that I'm adding here because I have that plus sign in between the parentheses. So I'm going to go ahead and add what that coefficient out front is going to be. So it's really a positive 1. And we've gone over that a few times. So I know that anything times a positive 1 is just going to be itself. Nothing's going to change. So if you remember the notes on the first page, if I'm distributing a positive 1, I can just ignore the parentheses. So I'm just going to rewrite all of these terms. I have a negative 2x squared, I have a negative 10x, and I also have a positive 3. If I look at the number in front of my first set of parentheses, right, that's a positive 2. Multiplying numbers with 2 is definitely going to change them, so I have to distribute that positive 2. So I'm going to distribute it to the first term, the second term, and the third term. I have to distribute to everything that's inside these parentheses. All right, so here we go. So 2 times 5 is 10. So I'll have a 10x squared. I'm done. Moving on. 2 times negative 10 is negative 20. So now I'll have a negative 20x. Done with the second term. And then the third, 2 times positive 1 is just positive 2. And now that I've distributed to all 3 terms inside, I can start combining my like terms. So let's go ahead and grab those. I can see that the 10 has an x squared attached, and I can see the negative 2 has an x squared attached. I know those are like terms, so I can combine them. I can see that this negative 20 has an x, and I can see that the negative 10 also has an x. That makes them like terms. I can combine those. And then again, I have a positive 2 and a positive 3. Those are just numbers. I can always combine those as well. All right, so let's go ahead and combine. So 10x squared minus 2x squared is 8x squared. Negative 20x minus 10x. So let me say that again. When you type it in the calculator, it's negative 20 minus 10. That gets you a negative 30. And then again, you keep the variable and the exponent. It's x to the first power. And then last but not least, in blue, we have a positive 2. So 2 plus 3 is just 5. It's a positive 5. And that would have been your answer for A. All right, let's try one more. Let's work on B. First step is to identify what the operation is. I can see that it's subtraction. All right. And I can see that the number out front of those parentheses here isn't just a negative 1, it's a negative 2. All right, so anytime I'm multiplying by a number that's not 1, right, that's not a positive 1, it's going to change. Those terms are going to change. So I'm going to go ahead and distribute this negative 2 to the first, the second, and the third term, because those will change. And then I'm also going to look at what my coefficient out front is for the first set of parentheses, and I'm not exactly seeing it. And that's okay. I know that it must be a positive 1. So if you remember your rules, anytime you're multiplying by a positive 1, you can ignore the parentheses. Nothing will change, right? 4 times 1 is 4. 1 times 1 is 1. Nothing will change. So we have a 4x squared plus x. Now the second set of parentheses will change. So let's distribute that negative 2. Negative 2 times 2 is negative 4, and then I bring down the x squared. Negative 2 times negative 3 is positive 6, and then I bring down the x. And then negative 2 times positive 3 is negative 6. Again, I'm going to go ahead and combine my like terms. So let's identify those. 4x squared is a like term with negative 4x squared. Positive x is a like term with positive 6x. And then this minus 6 here, right, that negative 6, it doesn't pair with anyone, and that's okay. We'll just ignore it for right now. So let's combine our pink and let's combine our orange first. So here we go. 4 minus 4 is 0. So the x squareds just cancel out. There's no more left. We are done. The leading coefficient here is really a positive 1. Don't forget, you can always add that on. So 1 plus 6 is 7. So now I have 7x. And then again, that minus 6 didn't combine with anything, and that's okay. It just drops down in the final answer. All right. So I'm going to ask you to try the questions that are left on this page, so letters C through J on your own. At this point, you can pause the video, and then you can check back in a minute for those answers. All right, here are the answers for C through H. Again, feel free to pause the video if I'm going too quickly going over these answers. All right. And then we have I and J at the bottom. All right, again, feel free to pause the video if I'm going a little too quickly. And then on the back, the very last page at the top is the closure. Again, that's for you to complete on your own. And then when you're done going over the closure, towards the bottom of the page is the homework. Okay, and again, that is what you should be completing on your own as well. All right, if you have any questions, feel free to send us a message in Canvas.